Your brain is not your destiny. It is a tool, and like any tool, it can be trained, sharpened, and upgraded. Every thought you repeat, every emotion you dwell in, every action you take is teaching your brain what to expect from life. Right now, whether you realize it or not, your mind is running patterns that were built from past experiences, old fears, and familiar habits. But what worked to protect you in the past may now be holding you back. Rewiring your brain begins the moment you decide that your future will not be controlled by outdated programming. For too long, many people live in reaction mode. They react to problems, to stress, to uncertainty, to the opinions of others. Their brains are trained to look for danger, disappointment, and limitation. That constant alert state drains energy and shrinks possibility. But the moment you choose to rewire your brain, you shift from reacting to creating. You stop letting circumstances dictate your state, and you start choosing your state deliberately. That choice alone is power. Your brain responds to focus. Whatever you focus on consistently becomes stronger. When you focus on fear, your brain gets better at finding reasons to be afraid. When you focus on problems, your brain becomes an expert at spotting obstacles. But when you focus on solutions, growth, and opportunity, your brain rewires itself to support expansion. This is not positive thinking for comfort. This is mental conditioning for performance. The brain you build determines the life you experience. Rewiring your brain requires awareness. You must first notice the thoughts you allow to repeat unchecked. Notice how quickly doubt shows up when you try something new. Notice how easily your mind goes to worst-case scenarios. These patterns are not facts, they are habits. And habits can be changed. The moment you catch a limiting thought and replace it with a stronger one, you weaken the old pathway and strengthen a new one. Over time, what once felt forced becomes automatic. Your emotional state is another powerful signal to your brain. When you stay in stress, frustration, or self-judgment, your brain believes you are under constant threat. That state limits creativity, focus, and confidence. But when you intentionally shift into certainty, gratitude, or determination, your brain receives a new message. You are capable, you are safe, you are moving forward. That emotional shift unlocks higher levels of performance and clarity. Action is where rewiring becomes permanent. Thoughts alone start the process, but action completes it. Every time you act despite fear, your brain learns that fear is not a stop sign. Every time you follow through on a promise to yourself, your brain learns trust. Every small win rewires your identity. You stop seeing yourself as someone who tries and start seeing yourself as someone who does. Identity change is the deepest form of mental rewiring. Your inner dialogue plays a massive role in this process. The words you use internally shape how your brain interprets reality. If you constantly criticize yourself, your brain associates effort with pain. If you speak to yourself with strength and direction, your brain associates effort with growth and reward. Change your language and you change your emotional state. Change your emotional state and you change your actions. Change your actions and your life transforms. Rewiring your brain also means breaking the addiction to certainty. Growth lives outside comfort. When you embrace uncertainty as a sign of expansion instead of danger, your brain adapts. You become more flexible, more resilient, more resourceful. You stop needing everything to be perfect before you move. You move first and clarity follows. That adaptability is a superpower in a world that constantly changes. The most important truth is this: your brain believes what you repeatedly prove to it. If you prove that you quit when things get hard, it will expect quitting. If you prove that you persist, adapt, and rise, it will expect strength. You don't rewire your brain in a single moment of inspiration. You rewire it through daily choices that align with the person you are becoming. Rewire your brain and you rewire your future. Train your mind to focus on what empowers you. Condition your emotions to fuel action instead of fear. Align your behavior with your highest standards. When your brain works for you instead of against you, everything changes. You stop surviving and start creating. You stop reacting and start leading. And once your mind is trained for growth, nothing can stop you from becoming unstoppable. Your brain is not a cage you are trapped inside. It is a tool you are holding every single day. It is not a fixed limit that decides who you are allowed to become. It is a system that learns from whatever you repeatedly feed it. Every belief you reinforce, every habit you repeat, every reaction you practice is shaping how your brain works. The problem is not that your brain is incapable of change. The problem is that most people never take conscious control of how it is being trained. They let past experiences, fear, and routine do the training for them. From an early age, the brain adapts to survive. It learns what feels safe, what feels familiar, and what seems risky. Over time, those survival patterns can turn into limitations. The brain starts avoiding discomfort, resisting uncertainty, and clinging to what it already knows, even when that familiarity is holding you back. This is why change can feel uncomfortable, not because you are incapable, but because your brain is protecting old patterns. Understanding this is powerful because it means resistance is not a sign to stop. It is a sign that rewiring has begun. Your brain changes through repetition. Whatever you do often becomes automatic. If you repeatedly doubt yourself, your brain becomes skilled at doubt. If you repeatedly hesitate, your brain becomes efficient at hesitation. But the opposite is also true. If you repeatedly choose courage, your brain learns confidence. If you repeatedly take action, your brain learns momentum. Nothing about this process is random. It is mechanical, predictable, and trainable. You are not stuck with the brain you have. You are building the brain you practice. Many people mistake their current thoughts for permanent truth. They think, this is just how I am, or this is how my mind works. But thoughts are not facts. They are habits. And habits can be replaced. The moment you challenge a limiting thought instead of accepting it, you begin to loosen its grip. The moment you choose a stronger response instead of a familiar one, you create a new pathway. With time and repetition, the new pathway becomes the default. This is how real change happens from the inside out. Your emotions play a major role in this training. The brain remembers emotionally charged experiences more strongly than neutral ones. That means fear-based experiences can leave deep imprints, but so can moments of confidence, pride, and achievement. When you intentionally create emotional states of certainty and determination while taking action, you strengthen those neural connections. You teach your brain that effort leads to reward, not danger. Over time, effort becomes less intimidating and action becomes more natural. Action is the most powerful rewiring tool you have. Thinking differently starts the process, but acting differently locks it in. Every time you do something you once avoided, your brain updates its understanding of what is possible. Every time you follow through on a commitment to yourself, your brain learns trust. You stop seeing yourself as someone who struggles and start seeing yourself as someone who grows. Identity shifts are not created by words alone, they are created by repeated proof. Your environment also trains your brain. What you consume, who you listen to, how you spend your time, all of it sends signals to your nervous system. If your environment constantly reinforces limitation, your brain adapts to limitation. If your environment supports growth, your brain expands. This is why intentional input matters. You are always being programmed by something. The question is whether that programming is happening by design or by default. Rewiring your brain does not mean eliminating fear or doubt. It means learning how to move forward despite them. Fear does not disappear because you are brave. It quiets down because your brain learns that fear does not control your actions anymore. Confidence is not the absence of uncertainty, it is the decision to act even when certainty is not guaranteed. Each time you choose action over avoidance, you weaken fear's authority and strengthen your sense of control. The most empowering realization is that progress does not require perfection. Your brain does not need massive change all at once. It responds to small, consistent shifts. A single better thought repeated daily is more powerful than 100 positive thoughts used once. A small action done consistently rewires more deeply than a dramatic action done rarely. Consistency trains the brain to expect progress. An expectation shapes behavior. Your brain becomes what you ask it to become. If you treat it like a fragile limit, it will protect you by keeping you small. If you treat it like a powerful tool, it will adapt to your standards. You are not waiting for your brain to change before you move forward. You move forward and your brain changes to support that movement. That is the truth that puts control back in your hands. When you understand that your brain is trainable, not fixed, you stop asking what is possible and start deciding who you will become. Awareness is the moment you step out of automatic living and take control of your inner world. Most mental patterns are not chosen, they are inherited from repetition. They were formed by past experiences, emotional reactions, and habits that ran unchecked for years. Without awareness, the mind operates on autopilot, replaying the same thoughts, the same fears, and the same reactions in different situations. You may think you are making new decisions, but in reality, you are often repeating old programming. Awareness is what interrupts that cycle. When you become aware of your thoughts, you create space between stimulus and response. Instead of instantly reacting to a challenge with doubt, frustration, or avoidance, you begin to notice the thought as it appears. That pause is powerful. It is in that pause that choice is born. Without awareness, the brain reacts. With awareness, the brain responds. That shift alone can change the direction of your life. Old mental patterns survive because they feel familiar, not because they are useful. The brain is designed to conserve energy, and familiar thoughts require less effort than new ones. This is why negative self-talk, worry, or fear can feel automatic. Awareness shines a light on these habits and reveals them for what they are, patterns, not truths. The moment you recognize a thought as a habit instead of a fact, it loses its authority. You stop identifying with it, and that separation weakens its hold. Awareness also exposes emotional triggers. Many reactions are not about the present moment at all. They are echoes of past experiences. A small challenge can activate a large emotional response because it reminds the brain of an earlier moment of failure, rejection, or uncertainty. Without awareness, these emotional reactions feel uncontrollable. With awareness, you begin to see the pattern. You recognize that the intensity of the reaction does not match the situation. That realization gives you back control. As awareness deepens, you start to notice the language you use internally. You become conscious of how often you speak to yourself in ways you would never speak to someone else. You hear the inner criticism, the doubt, the assumptions of failure. Once you notice this inner dialogue, you can challenge it. You can ask whether it is helping or hurting. Awareness gives you the power to replace destructive language with language that supports growth, effort, and resilience. Awareness also changes how you experience discomfort. Instead of labeling discomfort as a signal to stop, you begin to see it as a signal that growth is happening. You notice when your mind tries to pull you back into safety and predictability. Rather than obeying that impulse, you observe it. This observation creates distance, and distance creates freedom. You can feel discomfort without being controlled by it. That is a major break from old mental patterns. Another powerful aspect of awareness is recognizing repetition. You start to see how similar challenges show up in different forms. The same hesitation, the same excuse, the same fear dressed in new circumstances. Once you recognize the repetition, you can interrupt it. You can make a different choice simply because you see the pattern clearly. Patterns lose power when they are exposed. Awareness does not judge, it observes. This is important because judgment strengthens old patterns, while observation dissolves them. When you judge yourself for having a negative thought, you create resistance. When you observe the thought without attachment, it passes more easily. Awareness allows you to work with your mind instead of fighting it. That cooperation accelerates change. With consistent awareness, the mind becomes more flexible. You stop being dominated by the first thought that appears. You learn to question it, reshape it, or let it go. Over time, this practice rewires the brain. The old patterns weaken from lack of reinforcement, and new patterns grow through conscious choice. What once controlled you becomes something you manage. Awareness breaks old mental patterns because it removes unconscious control. It brings hidden habits into the light, where they can no longer operate in secrecy. It transforms you from a passive participant in your thoughts into an active director of your mindset. When you are aware, you are no longer trapped by the past. You are present, and presence is where change begins. Focus is the invisible force that shapes everything you produce, experience, and become. It determines how you perform because it decides where your energy goes. Energy follows attention. Whatever you focus on expands in importance, intensity, and impact. When your focus is scattered, your performance weakens. When your focus is deliberate, your performance sharpens. This is not a matter of talent or intelligence. It is a matter of where your mind consistently rests. Every moment your brain is filtering reality, it cannot process everything at once, so it's Sella. CTS what to highlight based on focus. If your focus is on problems, your brain becomes excellent at finding obstacles. If your focus is on fear, your brain magnifies risk and hesitation. But when your focus is on solutions, progress, and learning, your brain organizes itself around effectiveness. Performance improves not because conditions change, but because perception does. Lack of focus drains energy. When your attention jumps from one worry to another, from one task to the next without direction, your mental resources get depleted. You feel busy but unproductive, exhausted but unfulfilled. Focus brings efficiency. It allows your brain to work deeply instead of frantically. Deep focus turns effort into results because it aligns thought, emotion, and action toward a single outcome. Focus also shapes emotional state. When you dwell on what is missing or what could go wrong, your emotions follow that direction. Anxiety increases, motivation drops, confidence fades. But when you deliberately focus on what you can control, what you can improve, and what you are building, your emotional state stabilizes. That emotional stability directly affects performance. Calm focus leads to clearer thinking, better decisions, and stronger execution. Performance suffers when focus is reactive. Reacting to distractions, opinions, or short-term discomfort pulls you away from your intention. Focused individuals choose where to place attention instead of allowing it to be stolen. This choice protects momentum. It keeps you aligned with your priorities even when external noise increases. Discipline of focus is what separates progress from stagnation. Focus also determines how you interpret challenges. With unfocused attention, challenges feel overwhelming. With focused attention, challenges become manageable pieces. You stop thinking about everything that could go wrong and start think about the next effective step. That shift reduces stress and increases confidence. Performance improves because action becomes simpler and more direct. Your focus influences learning speed. When attention is divided, learning is shallow. When attention is concentrated, learning accelerates. Skills develop faster, understanding deepens, improvement compounds. This is why consistent focus produces long-term excellence. You don't need more time, you need better attention. Focus also reinforces identity. What you repeatedly focus on becomes part of how you see yourself. If you focus on mistakes, you identify as someone who falls short. If you focus on effort and improvement, you identify as someone who grows. Identity shapes behavior, and behavior determines performance. Changing focus changes self-perception, and self-perception changes results. The quality of your focus determines the quality of your actions. Half-focused actions produce half results. Fully focused actions produce momentum. Momentum builds confidence, and confidence fuels even stronger performance. This cycle continues as long as focus remains intentional. Ultimately, focus determines performance because it is the gateway to your potential. You do not rise to the level of your intentions, you rise to the level of your attention. When you train your focus, you train your results. When you protect your attention, you protect your progress. And when you master focus, performance stops being inconsistent and starts becoming predictable. Emotional states are not just reactions to life. They are powerful signals that train your brain every day. Your brain is constantly learning from how you feel, especially during moments of intensity. Emotions tell the brain what matters, what to remember, and how to respond in the future. When certain emotional states are repeated often enough, they become the brain's default setting. This is how emotional patterns are formed, and this is how the brain is quietly reprogrammed over time. When you live in stress, fear, or frustration, your brain interprets the world as unsafe and unpredictable. It shifts into protection mode, prioritizing survival over growth. In this state, creativity narrows, focus scatters, and confidence drops. The brain becomes more reactive, scanning for threats instead of opportunities. If this emotional state is repeated daily, the brain adapts to it, making stress feel normal and calm feel unfamiliar. This is not because stress is necessary, but because it has been practiced. On the other hand, emotional states like certainty, gratitude, determination, and calm strength send a very different message to the brain. These states signal safety, capability, and control. When the brain receives these signals, it opens access to higher-level thinking. Problem-solving improves, memory sharpens, focus deepens, the brain becomes more flexible and resilient. Over time, these emotional states become easier to access because the brain has learned them as familiar territory. The brain does not distinguish between emotions created by external events and emotions generated intentionally. It responds to both in the same way. This means you do not have to wait for life to improve before you feel stronger. You can deliberately create empowering emotional states, and your brain will adapt accordingly. Each time you shift your emotional state on purpose, you weaken the dominance of old patterns and strengthen new ones. Emotions also attach meaning to experiences. Two people can go through the same situation and be shaped by it in completely different ways based on the emotional state they bring to it. When an experience is paired with fear or shame, the brain stores it as something to avoid. When an experience is paired with curiosity or determination, the brain stores it as a lesson or opportunity. Over time, these emotional pairings shape behavior and identity. Reprogramming the brain through emotional states requires consistency. One moment of confidence cannot outweigh years of doubt, but repeated moments of confidence can. Every time you choose to respond with strength instead of panic, you are teaching your brain a new response. Every time you hold your emotional ground during pressure, you prove to your nervous system that you can handle challenge without collapsing. That proof changes future reactions. Emotional states also influence physical posture, breathing, and energy. The body and brain are deeply connected. When your posture is closed and tense, your emotional state tends to follow. When your posture is open and grounded, your emotional state lifts. These physical shifts send signals to the brain that reinforce confidence and control. Over time, the brain learns to associate these states with safety and capability. Another powerful aspect of emotional reprogramming is recovery speed. Empowering emotional states shorten the time it takes to bounce back from setbacks. Instead of staying stuck in disappointment or frustration, you regain balance faster. This ability to recover is a sign that the brain has learned resilience. It no longer treats setbacks as threats, but as temporary conditions. The brain becomes what it repeatedly experiences emotionally. This is why emotional awareness and regulation are essential for long-term change. You cannot think your way into a new life while feeling stuck in old emotional states. Change becomes real when thoughts, emotions, and actions align. Emotional states are the bridge that connects intention to behavior. When you intentionally cultivate emotional states that support growth, you are not denying reality, you are training our nervous system to handle reality more effectively. You are teaching your brain that you are capable, adaptable, and strong. Over time, these states become automatic. Calm replaces chaos. Confidence replaces hesitation. Strength replaces fear. Emotional states reprogram the brain because they define how experiences are stored and how future challenges are approached. When you master your emotional state, you stop being controlled by circumstances and start shaping your responses. That mastery is not just emotional intelligence, it is mental freedom.